Hello and welcome to Silver Filers. I'm very excited today to be inviting a very special guest and his co-pilot, I think we'll call him, to Silver Filers today. We have the wonderful William Kilbride and his special co-guest.
Here we
It's
go. It's
it's Buzz Kilbride.
Buzz the dog joins us today, Emily. Really, it's the interview with Buzz that everyone's here for. I'll answer a few questions as we go, but everyone knows the number one dog of digital preservation will probably have a view on everything. So I'll apologise on his behalf if the doorbell goes or a bin lorry goes past. I'm afraid he cannot resist barking and hitting off in those moments, but we've just had a nice walk, so he's nice and calm,
He's nice and
nice and happy.
calm.
Yeah.
Real good in the hood. I have to say, I am a number one fan of Buzz and very excited that he's here with us today.
And
Um,
I hope that our M dog will make an appearance at some point, at least if not today on the series at some point. That will be
I
a
can
good
pretty
interview.
much guarantee it will be at some point. At the minute he's snoozing, so you might hear a bit of yipping in the background,
Okay.
and sort of like the scrabbling of legs as he's kind of chasing the bunnies.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, he's a bit of an old man now, so he kind of just mostly sleeps. Bless him.
I'm
He's
looking
12.
forward to that
Yeah,
point
he's
myself,
12 and a
sooner not later.
Yeah, he's 12 and a half, so he's basically, I don't know what that is in dog years, 90 or something like that. I can't do the math.
Fairly advanced, yeah, a bigger number than is decent.
Bless his little white
Yes.
socks. So let's get on with the interview, shall we, with the introductions. Basically, I've obviously said your name, but that doesn't necessarily
Yes.
tell me who you are and what you do. So do you want to kind of give me a bit of a background? Because I know who you are, but I'm not sure our listeners will.
Of course, Emily. Listen, thank you very much as well before we get going for the invitation to speak and to have this conversation. It's lovely to be with you and to share
Yeah.
this now. So my name is William Kilbride. I am the director of a strange little organisation which is not widely known but will be, I think, well known in the records management community in the UK. I'm the director of the Digital Preservation Coalition, or the DPC, as more generally
Love them
known.
guys.
Yeah.
Shout out to your team. Whoop whoop.
Yeah, a big team or a great team. It's not a massive team. There's currently 10 of us in the DPC, and that I have to say that feels like a huge team because I've been at the DPC now for 12 years. 12 years. So I know this is the silver filers, the concept being that it's 25 years. And if I
Yeah.
do my sums, then that's 25 years. Half of that is at the
Yeah, I'm not
DPC
inviting
for
you
me.
because you're an old fossil or anything. Um,
Well, I've got a lot more grey since lockdown began, that's for sure.
I
Uh,
worked it out that so I've got 15 years in the profession, and so I will be 42 when I reach 25 years.
right.
Um, and so I didn't like the idea of calling it old fossils. On the concept is that I won't be that old when I reach 25 years because I'm not planning on leaving the profession anytime soon.
Exactly, and that's good to know. And it's the age you feel, isn't it? It's not the age you are. That's the part that matters.
Yeah, very much so. If dogs can be older than us and pretend to be another age, then
So, so can we all. So can we all.
so 12 years in the DPC. Let's
Yes.
give a kind of like a go back to the past, as it were, with you,
Yes.
and kind of like um, in entirety, what is your experience years? So 25 years is obviously the qualifier for being on here, but is it more than 25, or what year are we looking at when you first noticed you were in like digital preservation or in records management?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of people, I kind of fell into it by accident, and so knowing exactly when it began is a tricky one. But there's a couple of landmarks for you, so we can use those as a basis. So the first landmark would be 1994. Okay, so summer 1994, I did a master's dissertation. I'll talk more about how I ended up in this field later, but I did a master's dissertation which concerned itself with electronic publishing, right? So now, 1994, the internet was
Oh,
brand
yeah, they are.
new. You know, we were using NCSA Mosaic, HTML. I was the person who could do a website. And that was very exciting, right? But of course, what happened in immediately, I did this as a master's dissertation. Of course, I then left and did another job, and then this website appears. And of course, the website's got this kind of slightly kind of publishy kind of. We set up a little electronic journal, and then for years that electronic journal never went beyond its first edition because no one picked it up. And that seems to me to be a bit of a lesson there in continuity and preservation. So that seems to me a place to start. Although it was more the creation, it wasn't really the preservation that was concerning me then. And then subsequent to that, I found myself working in, and I'll say more about this again later, but I found myself solving lots of people's data management problems. And again, I didn't know that it was digital preservation I was doing, or curation, or whatever term you wish to use. But you would have this feeling that the university, would upgrade its software, and you would have a year's worth of field work, and then you would come home, and then maybe start of the next season, you would get everything out again, you would shape it up, and then you realise the software's bust because there's a new generation, a new version of whatever it might be, DBase or whatever it was we were using back in the day. And that needed solving. So that was a migration question right there. And that would be about 96, 97. That would be
I remember being at an IRMS conference and trying to convince everybody that floppy disks were a thing of the future. They definitely weren't, I can tell you that. I think I was very drunk.
Yes.
As much as that's not what the IRMS conference is about, I just remember that one thing. It's like, we're probably talking 2011 when that happened.
These things do happen.
They do indeed.
So there's those two moments in my career, and then the kind of the moment which I think it all fell into place for me was about 1998. In fact, I can date it. It was the first week in September 1999. I started working for a little organisation at that point called the Archaeology Data Service, and that's explicitly digital preservation. So that was the moment, if you like, when I realised that I wasn't just working in an obscure wee corner of the world on a peculiar set of topics that only related to me. Actually, it turns out other people are working on this too, and the ADS was the open door to that for me. Yes, they do. They are going strong, in fact. So the Archaeology Data Service was itself, I think, set up around 96 or 97 with a job of looking after data from archaeological excavations. And that's my route into records management and digital preservation, actually. I'll come back to that in a moment. But of course, research in archaeology is destructive. Archaeologists we are the biggest threat to the historic environment because there's nothing we like more than to systematically dismantle it. It's called excavation, and the records that come out are very important. So ADS has been in existence and continuing and more or less unchanged, actually, still based at the University of York, but now with a massive archive of reports and data and materials.
You were in York?
Yes.
How long,
yeah.
I just want to point out your accent and your.
Right. Yeah, so I worked in York from 1999 through to 2006. So seven years thereabouts.
You left Scotland to go to York?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And then you returned to Scotland?
I did. So in terms of career, I started in Scotland. I did my studies in archaeology, but then that moment I described for the web publishing thing, that actually was I studied a master's in Southampton University. So I spent
let's talk about your university then. So you clearly went to university.
Yes, you've got to that, but got to that question. Yeah, so Southampton University for a year, then back to Glasgow where I did more studies, and I did teaching around computing and related matters in archaeology. And then York for 7 years as part of the Archaeology Data Service. Then a wee sidestep for me. I came back to Scotland, kind of family reasons, but we came back to Scotland, and I had a nice 3 years thereabouts working for the City Council. I worked for the City Museum Service in Glasgow, which was a super job. I had the best job title, by the way, I'll ever have, because I was my job title was the head of human history. Beat that with a stick. And although I should explain, that's the history curator part, it's archaeology and classics and history and all the kind of different
Head of
things.
human history, you now are. That's
Well, I know it didn't give me any influence over it whatsoever, right, unfortunately. But and then that led me from there to the DPC, where I am still to this day.
and you run DPC. You're like the top man.
Yeah, head honcho. It doesn't always feel that way, but yes, I am. The
Good job,
DPC. I mean, it's true. When I joined the DPC, it was a tiny little organisation, right? So there were two of us. There was myself and Carol when I started, and for years that was the DPC. It was a very, very small outfit. What's happened over the 12 years is that we've grown. So we've grown in actual number of people and in members and in activities and in all the sort of things that you're familiar with. All of that sort of program of work has expanded over the years, and I've been trying to keep all the plates spinning all that time. But of course, like many of you will know, you know, in records management, there's lots of kind of small companies or small consultancies. You've got to do everything, you know. You have to fill the photocopier and make the coffee. You don't have the option. You can give yourself a grand job title, but the reality is, you know, someone has to do the banking and someone has to do the, you know, the franking of the mail and whatever.
Yeah,
So
very much so. I remember I started out in records management, and although I was called business support assistant, I was fundamentally the filing clerk.
yeah,
And I did all the filing and the faxing, and that's pretty much my day in, day out. And
yeah.
that's kind of where I entered into records management because I asked my mum, do you think this job, records management officer, has anything to do with filing? If so, they can sod off.
Yes.
So there you go. So your first job we've already talked about, and kind of where you are at now. I'm just kind of going thinking, what would you
Sure.
say your best achievement has ever been?
Do you know, that's a good question. I mean, there are different ways of thinking with that. I mean, when you pitched that question to me a moment ago, this is the moment that occurs to me. Okay, this isn't necessarily my best moment. Certainly the most exciting, I think, moment. For a variety of reasons, I found myself in New York a few years ago doing some work for the United Nations.
Oh wow!
And that's always felt to me like a high point. I don't quite know why. It's almost an emotional appeal, you know. But there was a moment when there was a kind of big meeting. I was doing some additional support. You know, they're involved in the coalition. They're involved in the Digital Preservation Coalition. They have their own digital preservation questions. But I found myself there, and there was one of those moments when there was one of those little kind of big tables, you know, with everyone's little names on them. And if we'd needed them, there would have been flags, you know. And that just feels to me like I will never go better than that. I think in my life, because that just felt like, gosh, this. By the way, there's really serious people in this room. You know, they're really world class minds and really significant challenges are being discussed, and yet here they are just briefly turning to, you know, to yours truly for a word on some of the matters. And it was a privilege to be there, a privilege to share that company, but also a kind of a visual highlight, if you see what I mean.
What year was that?
So that would have been. It was before Donald Trump was president, so it must have been maybe 2015, something like that.
So speaking of Trump, when I think about best achievements, I remember seeing something that hit the press that the curator, I think they're in Leicestershire, but I can't be sure on that. The curator there has managed to get hold of the Trump baby balloon. And I can
Yes.
just imagine the curator going, "You know what I've done? I've achieved the unachievable." Kind of.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. You can go home on that.
I
That
will
feels good.
not reach anything better than the fact that I got hold of the Trump baby balloon.
Yes. Yes. Actually, you ask another. That's another kind of crazy kind of highlight in my career as well. If I may, just you made a connection for me that I wasn't expecting, which is that when I worked for Glasgow Museums, we were at that point building a new big transport museum. It's now open, Riverside Museum. It won all sorts of prizes, but it fell into my lap to be involved in a bid to buy a Pope mobile. I won't explain much of the context, but there was, Pope John Paul came to Glasgow, and the Pope mobile that he happened to drive around in suddenly became available on the market. And can you believe we, of course, thought to ourselves, well, that's a great thing to, as a story to tell, to put in the Transport Museum. It's got a lot going on. It turns out that there are collectors of such things, however, and they outbid us. So I was outbid for a Popemobile. Not necessarily a career highlight, but certainly one to take home with you, you know, and remember.
A question there, though, that goes to my head: would you have taken it for a joyride?
Well, it would be hard not to. I mean, I suspect regulations might have prevented it somehow. There might have been conservation or curatorial reasons why that would have been inappropriate to be driving around the south side of Glasgow in a Popemobile. But it would have been a sore temptation, no doubt.
It's definitely a sort of like the resistance was definitely futile if it had actually happened. So
Yes,
that's
yes,
quite an epic kind of thing to think about. Like all, so an example for me is that when I moved to London, which is where I am now,
yes,
um, the fact that like Buckingham Palace is just down the road
yes,
is mind blowing for me because when you watch stuff on TV and even now, I'm like, that is literally happening
yes.
down the road from me, and that connection is really bizarre. Sort of, so yeah, I can't think if there's anything really for me that's happened yet. I think I've still got to wait for another. I don't qualify for this podcast
Uh,
as it happens. I'm just taking the chair and running with it.
we should see though what would be your what would be a highlight, do you think? Where would you like to be? Maybe that's maybe I'm not asking you the questions, that's the wrong way around, but
I'll tell you what, I'll come back to you on that one when I think of
okay,
something. Or maybe you can run my 25th anniversary
that's what we'll
podcast.
do. That's a very good idea.
So we've talked about your highlights, and it would always be good to think about the things that perhaps went a bit wrong
Yes,
in your career, things that you thought might be like the end of it, or you know what, I can't deal with this, I want to leave this profession, and stuff like
yes,
that. And the aim of this podcast is about kind of passing on knowledge to newcomers into the industry and to keep people going and while they're doing, and just
yes,
highlighting the fact that it's not all roses
yes.
all the time. So, what's your worst mistake you've ever made?
Oh man, worst
Without landing
mistake.
in prison.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I guess I would call them more sins of omission. Things which I wasn't able to do that I look back and wish I had. I wish I had stepped in. I wish I had been more
Yeah.
successful with. I mean, again, kind of reflecting back on early days, I remember uh, trying to help a particular colleague with a complex database question, and he had been supplied the database that he could use for his own kind of research and supplied to him by a government agency, and it was quite a negotiation for him to get access to it, and it arrives in a whole format and a whole style that he just couldn't make any sense of. And I remember spending a good few weeks trying to help sort the data structure and trying to import and export and make sense of that data for him. And in the end, I never succeeded. And I realized now my mistake. I kind of felt bad about that because he'd gone to this huge effort to obtain this data without really, I think, understanding the challenges that he was facing. And then turned to me just as a kind of colleague or friend to try and help him solve it. But I realized actually there should have been a much better discussion about the format of the data before we ever received it, you know. And I should have actually been advising him not after the data arrived. I should have been a friend to him before that data arrived. And I kind of look back on that sometimes with a kind of, oh, well, I think he paid for some consultancy or some advice or computing support, but that sticks in my mind from the early days, as it were.
And I
Uh,
think there's a key thing there to say, you can't be there in everything that you do. So
yeah,
being nice to yourself and being kind about things that have gone in the past is quite important. And they may not be world ending in the end. It might feel like it at the time, but
yeah,
um, is to try and kind of be kind to yourself is that, did you do your best as far as you knew at the time?
yes,
If the answer was yes, then there's nothing more you can say about it.
exactly so. And knowing the right time to intervene, is also, I think, a real trick. You can save a huge amount of effort if you just think your way through a problem and intervene at the right moment rather than trying to fix afterwards always. So getting in early, getting the right fix at the right time so that things follow down the line much, much, much healthier, much better. No doubt.
Um, would you say that is your newcomer advice?
Well, I guess maybe I'll contradict myself here, which is in terms of digital preservation, my advice is oftentimes to get started. I think in the field that I work in, there is oftentimes a bit of a freeze. People can be, what's the word, uh, waiting for perfection. You know, there's all sorts of reasons not to do digital preservation. Oftentimes those reasons are because other things that seem more of a urgent priority. Uh, so actually, my newcomer advice is to get your sleeves rolled up and to get started. Try something. You know, some of the people I speak to, you'll appreciate this. Some of the people I speak to, you have to say to them, uh, "Don't store the backups on the floor of the server room." You know, or have backups, even, and that, those simple steps, right? Start with what you can achieve, but do get on and do something. Don't leave it until it's already all too late. That's really the advice, and maybe that does synchronize with what I'm saying from that previous experience, that actually, you know, get a handle on things early, make
Yeah,
some progress early,
I'm just
is good advice.
trying to think around, you know, that skill that you're talking about does come with time. I believe is that you're not going
Yeah.
to get everything right all the time,
Yes.
and you learn lessons, and I think that for me is one of the key things to say to people is that
Yeah.
you learn from everything, and if you're not learning, then obviously you're not doing it right. Um,
Absolutely.
Stop learning about stuff just because you feel you've kind of met capacity.
Yeah.
You've got opportunities to get rid of things that we're not using anymore in your
Yeah.
head. Um,
Yes. Yes.
practice records management in your head. Take new skills.
Yes. Exactly. Disposal arrangement. Have the things you need close to hand. Uh, Absolutely right. If you're not learning, if you're in this field and you're not learning, then you're doing something wrong. You know,
Um,
and thinking about in a career sense as well. What I realise, kind of think about the coalition. What I realise, Emily, is that so digital preservation is an interesting topic for me. There's a lot in it, but it's the coalition part actually is the bit that keeps me coming. You know, it's the new doors that are constantly opening, the new relationships, the new people, the generation of amazingly qualified people that are coming up that didn't exist when I was starting. That's the part that keeps me coming back to this
that's
role.
actually one of the questions is, what has kept you going in the profession? And obviously, you're answering that is that, um, but would you say that that is the thing that keeps you going is meeting new people, doing things, or what is it you like about the profession that you've just stayed?
Yeah, well, it's certainly a very friendly and very welcoming group. It's immensely dynamic. And that means that you can learn from people all the time. I'm always struck by, maybe you have this experience too. I have this experience of people looking to me to be the expert for things. And for sure, I've got expertise, but there's never anyone I've met that I've not also been able to learn from, So people come to me or they come to the coalition and they're, oh, we need help with this, we need help with that. And we're very happy to give that. But on almost every case, actually you learn from them about policy, about organizational structures, about record creation, about needs and user requirements, and all of that stuff is going to come if you have the intuition to learn and the intuition to listen to what other people have to say.
And I think it's also okay to say, I don't know.
Yes,
So
yes.
someone came to me about blockchain, and I just was just like,
Well,
I don't know.
yes, yeah, yeah. What do you expect me? Yeah, what do you expect? You do everything, or know everything.
And as much as I would love to know, I still have got no idea. I've listened to many, many talks and still don't understand. And I think that's also something to think about is that,
Yes,
sometimes it's just not your bag.
yes, yes.
And is there anything out there that you'd say is that like I just don't understand it? Like,
Yeah, you've mentioned blockchain already, so there's let's let's plant the flag in there. I sometimes worry that there are solutions looking for questions, and I think over time, I think again, advice to someone joining new is don't be afraid to put your hand up and say that you don't understand something or that you need clarification,
Mm.
because there's all sorts of technology that, there are people selling it, and they're not necessarily got our interests at heart. There is, things that they'll make a profit out of selling it and move on to the next project or the next client. So I think constantly being brave enough to say you don't understand or you don't know isn't a weakness at all.
I'm also that person, and it tends to rub people up the wrong way, and it's not meant to, but it just is one of those things where I ask questions,
Yes.
but I just generally don't understand why you're here and what you're doing. And some of the questions, just like I preface it with, "This is probably a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway." And most of the time, what I've found is that they're not stupid questions. They're questions people don't ask.
Yes.
So a question isn't like asking a question. You might rub people up the wrong way because they just don't simply know, or they're not
Yes.
expecting that question, or they don't know. So
Yes.
kind of just keep going with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you sometimes find that actually there's sometimes the most troublesome parts are where there's actually a bit of a breakdown in communications. I don't mean to say that it's a kind of visceral or personal thing, but you get, you know, computing scientists will have a very different idea of what an archive is, than say, an archivist or a records manager. What a record is, I've sat in too many meetings where people have described portals to me, and you think, what is this, right? And then you realise at the end of the day, having done a whole day's worth of requirements, you're all talking about something subtly different, right?
I mean, if Microsoft can get it really twisted with SharePoint as to what a record is, against ISO 15489, then
Yes,
you know, if they can get it
absolutely,
different, so can
absolutely.
we.
So finding where communities use the same term differently is just the most important.
Excellent. With that in mind, did you look up to anybody in your career that they may not be around anymore? I don't know, or like if there was a specific person that you idolized, or anything. Is there anyone that you kind of went, I want to be just like them? Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's loads of people. I mean, you're obviously yourself and included in the assembly, of
no, no,
course.
no, 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 no,
Uh,
no.
but so I kind of going back again to sort of early career for me. I did a PhD in archaeology, so I'm an archaeologist by training. It's kind of hinted
I
at
had no
earlier.
idea you were Dr. William Cooper.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's confusing to, especially in the primary school. That's they're kind of forever coming to me with cuts and bruises. But so I would always say my PhD supervisor actually is someone I kind of really looked up to. I still do look up to, although he's not very tall, so it's ironic to say I look up to him if you knew him at all. Uh, but in any case, because he and I just think completely differently, I think is the point. And he's incredibly methodical, incredibly meticulous, kind of very measured, think things through, maybe shy, maybe quiet. And I tend to be a bit kind of jump in, both feet. I don't, I try something out and then I'll write the plan. Just a very different sort of approach. But actually, I guess that makes for mutual compatibility to some extent. But I wish I had that. I wish I had that sort of more methodical skills. I wish I had that more sort of focus. The nature of my work now is typically expansive. I don't get the opportunity to focus, but I wish I had that capacity to focus. I envy those that do have that skill. So very much my PhD supervisor is very much the person I look up to in my kind of professional
Um,
life.
you care to shout them out as to who they are? Or?
Of course, sorry, Jeremy Huggett. Who's now retired. He's kind of computing and archaeology at Glasgow University, and he sat through my thesis, which was as a trial. So well done, Jeremy. But that sort of I can really see those virtues. I really see those virtues, and wish I could aspire to them and model them and bring them with me.
Would you
In
say he
my
was
current work.
a mentor to you in just your career as a whole? Or
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, you'll see that strange evolution of my career, that strange evolution from some kind of academic kind of sort of fieldwork discipline through to what's kind of information management side of things has been a unusual evolution. And for me, at no point did I sort of think on a careers advice form that I want to work in digital preservation. It didn't arise, So what I see there are the professional virtues, thoughtfulness and generosity with your time, clarity, transparency in your decisions, honesty, even with a tough conversation. Those are the real virtues. And so I really do. It's kind of mentorship, yeah, rather more than a sort of professional development thing. It's about who do you want to be as a professional, and would you like to be like this, or would you like to be like that?
So, what did you actually want to be when you were growing up? Because I definitely didn't want to be an archivist or a record manager.
I just wanted to be the usual things, Emily, which is
Did
to
you
say
want
I
to be
wanted
a
to be an
princess?
well, no, I didn't want to be a princess. That's fair. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be. If I couldn't do that, then I would have been Starsky and Hutch, or Starsky or Hutch. I'm not sure which. Probably. So, I mean, as I say, archaeology held my attention. I guess I'm of that generation where Indiana Jones was the, kind of early teens kind of movie kind of experience for me. So that held my attention, and I think that's probably to some extent why I took that particular route through kind of university or through my kind of studies. Also, there was a distinct moment when I thought I'd got to my I got to university, I sort of sat down in the lecture room, and it was such an alien, it was a really alien experience. I had no particular kind of context for it, but the archaeology took us out on field trips, and took us out to castles and to abbeys and to random places in the countryside with humps and bumps and things to look at. And actually that was a kind of moment for me as well. Actually I really like this. I can,
I went
it's not
to
all sitting with the
Dundee.
books.
I went to Dundee University, and as much as I've been doing it long distance, we did have a trip there, and
Yes.
they took us out. There was because of the entire cohort, there was let's just say 30. I can't remember the exact numbers. There's 30 in the group, and 27 of them were in archives and digital preservation, and then
Yes.
we had three of us who were in information rights. So what
Yes.
they were getting an introductory to something to do with their course, we got taken out and got taken up the Dundee. I won't say hill, but it's got an actual name. And it's
Yeah.
kick me later when I can't remember the name of it, and I all of a sudden remember. Um,
Is it Caird Park? Caird, I'm going to say Caird Hall's the big hall. That'll come to me as well.
it's a hill that we were stood on, um, and I've got pictures of it and everything.
Yes.
We might be able to edit in the name later. Who
We'll
knows?
do that.
Yes, I love a field trip, so I completely understand that.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, let's have a think about sort of like educational stuff that you
yeah,
would recommend to anyone listening.
yeah.
What's your Bible when it comes to digital preservation? What's the one book you'd say you need this book if you want to understand digital preservation?
Yeah, so I would go for two sources here, if I may, if I'm allowed.
Yeah,
I
sure.
allowed two things on the desert island disc kind of question. So the first one is, I mean, we put a lot of effort at the DPC. We put a lot of effort into the Digital Preservation Handbook, which is an online free resource, and that is as good a resource as you could hope for in terms of attempting to provide a complete view. Right, it's hard to get the detail in there, but if you want a complete account, if you like, of how to begin every question in digital preservation, the handbook, touch wood, the handbook will provide that. So I would start there. I can
Do you
always
get it
recommend
in a
that.
hard copy or is it
Uh,
only
it's only online, but you can download it as a PDF and print your own if you were
online? Yeah.
so
Okay.
inclined. Uh, it was originally published as a hard copy back in 2001. I think it was originally published 2002, something like that. But that's always been a kind of go-to guide
It's ever
for me.
evolving as well. So when you do it first in 2002, obviously you can add more stuff to it, and
Exactly.
yeah.
And actually, it's a bit of a struggle to keep it up to date because it's such a rapidly changing field. So there was a complete rewrite, like we set everything aside, started again in 2016, and that was the basis for now ongoing kind of little segments that are dropped in. So we've just added, just in the last 2-3 months, we've added a whole bunch of new little resources, tool demos actually. So there's, if you want to do characterization or whatever, there's little tool demos on how you do that and how you would, kind of videos on how you would achieve some of that. So it's more than just a book, if you like. It's got a lot of that kind of interactive stuff. But if you were to steer me towards a specific publication, I'm a massive fan of the work that Adrian Brown does. Adrian is he works for the House of Lords, Parliamentary Archives. I'm not sure exactly what his
Spell
job
his last
title
name
would
for
be.
me, please.
Sorry?
Spell his last name for me.
Yes, so it's Adrian Brown, so Brown. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, apologies. I thought you said drown.
Yeah, no, Adrian Brown. And Adrian has, I'm an immense amount of time for him as a person. He's very generous with his time, very thoughtful, and immensely experienced in a very complex environment as well, by the way, because decision making there is an art form. Yeah. But he's also written a guide. There's a guidebook called something like Digital Preservation, a how-to guide for organizations of all sizes. I should check the title there too. Yeah. And if you cannot get the answer from the handbook that we publish, you'll get it from Adrian's book. It's a wonderful resource. So I highly recommend that to anyone that's kind of coming in.
Have you ever thought about writing a book yourself? Obviously, you've got the guide from the DPC, but a book written by Dr. William Kilbride.
Well, it does occur to me from time to time, and actually I've been kind of tapped on the shoulder to do that a few times. But to be honest, I've never known how to find the time to do it, Emily. I got myself into a nice pattern a year or so ago, a nice pattern of always working from home on a Friday. And the deal was, on a Friday, I would sit and I could read, I could think, I could write, I could be a bit creative, which I wasn't being previously. Everything was just so sort of frenetic. So I was deliberately taking myself out of the office on a Friday to do that. And then, of course, the pandemic, gets in the way. So suddenly everyone's working from home and everything is always Friday for that regard. But I've kind of fallen out of the habit of writing. So I should, in an ideal world, get myself back on the horse. And do that.
Just kind of calling out on that in terms of the pandemic and how COVID has hit. Have you seen that you're not just your team working differently, but things differently in terms of digital preservation and how to be managing that?
Yeah, I have. I mean, so thinking about our team and the coalition, I mean, there's a certain amount of distance already built into the DPC, but we're always distributed. And so Zoom and online meetings was just routine for us, right? So there was no big change. It wasn't like a massive, some organizations have had a real sudden change in terms of how they work, but we were quite quick to evolve into that. The area where I think there has been a massive increase in digital preservation thinking in the context of the pandemic, because a lot of archivists and records managers, to a less extent, suddenly found themselves at home, and suddenly unable to access the physical collections. I actually could spend some time and effort thinking around the digital puzzles, those puzzles which have been kind of set off and maybe put on hold for a little while, been kind of delayed. Well, it's time to write your digital preservation policy. It's time to look at the implementation plan. It's time to write the business case. It's time to build a technology stack or whatever it is. And it's absolutely the case that volumes going in, the ingest processes for digital repositories have gone through the roof. So there's a big demand, and it's because that's the work that people are able now to do and can do remotely and can do from home much more easily than they would be able to have done with the physical collections.
Okay.
So my sense is the last year and a half has been a really busy time in digital preservation.
There's that sort of that, because this is all new, things haven't happened in our lifetime. We understand obviously things like this have happened in the past, but majority of people are no longer alive. I don't think anyone is alive, maybe. I don't know. But that whole need to capture everything.
Yes.
And get a hold, it's like COVID collecting of everything, so that if this happens in the future, people can look back. Because you imagine people in 100 years' time looking back at 2020 and go, God, that was a terrible year, wasn't it?
Yeah, look how badly prepared they were. Look how little they knew, or how poorly they responded, how complacent we were.
And just to think of that is that what you do in digital preservation means that those people in 100 years will indeed be able to access that information.
Exactly so.
And without what you do, they won't.
Yes.
And that's really quite a key thing that I think, gosh, you are obviously putting a huge impact on the future and retaining the historical interest, and not just in sort of just what things happened in 2021, that kind of thing, but really mind blowing things of facts and figures and making sure people can access that stuff going forward.
Yeah.
Um,
It really is. It's the data sets that are accumulated. There'll be different types, of course, but it's a simulation for everything, really. All sorts of opportunities to learn from the what happened. I mean, the mistakes, for better or for worse, the things that went right, the things that were just pure luck. Over the last year, there's an awful lot to learn, and if we can capture that and capture it as best we can in real time, and to capture it in forms and ways that are going to be accessible for the long term, then we'll have done a good job. We'll have served the world well and earned our keep that way.
and we're just kind of coming to the end here, and I kind of think about some funny questions I could ask you. Um, but one things that I think is really important, is it tea or coffee?
Oh, good question. Normally it will be coffee.
And how do you
Although
make it?
again, depending on context, but the coffee pot downstairs in the morning, it's just white, black coffee. Sorry, just regular filter coffee, as it were, with a splash of milk.
Sweet
But
enough already without sugar.
without sugar.
Sweet
Without
enough.
sugar. But here's the thing for the silver filers amongst you, is that what I have to be honest and say that as I get older, coffee agrees with me less and less. So by this point in the day, right? So as we're chatting, it's just after 2 o'clock, aren't we? And if I have a cup of coffee now, that'll keep me up for the rest of the night. So there comes a point about midday where it has to move to tea, otherwise I'm done for. And I think that it didn't used to happen to me, so I'm putting that down to age.
And I have a funny one that uh, they're asking you. You're just gonna be like, where did that come from? That's very like right for you. Um, Carrots for nose or lettuce for ears?
Oh, carrots for nose.
But why?
I'm not entirely sure. But and another aspect of the pandemic, though, this is a weird bit of storytelling, is that we couldn't make it to the shop, so we started getting fruit and veg delivered. So there's a little delivery van that comes around with fruit and veg, and they have hundreds of carrots every week. It's a little one of those kind of farm boxes, and all they ever seem to give us is carrots. So anything I can use a carrot for is going to be thumbs up for me. So that's maybe the reason why.
You're going through various different types of carrot just to keep it entertaining. Al
Exactly.
dente, chopped, diced, boiled, tinned. You know,
Absolutely.
where there's a carrot is where William will be.
Exactly. So recipes for Russian salad, just write to me. I'm interested. Or whatever we could do with them.
Got coleslaw coming out your ears.
Exactly.
And does your co-pilot like being picked up, or is he like not a fan?
Yeah, but shall we see how that goes? Is that where we're heading to with this? Excuse me,
I
a wee
think so.
moment.
Yeah.
Let's see.
If he's happy to kind of come face to face, 6 inches away from the camera like you are.
Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do. Right? Are you going to come and say hello, Buzz? Are you going to come and say hello? We're getting a wee look. Do you see that? Right. I'm going to try and do this without throttling myself as well. You see? Oh, I'm getting a wee growl. Are you going to come up? Should you come up and see the camera? Oh, no, he's off. Hang on. He made a tactical error there. There he goes.
Oh dear.
There he goes.
Buzz.
Yeah, you're going to say hello? You're going to wave?
Buzz. You got to see your adoring fans, Buzz.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. Opa!
Put me down.
Got myself in a tangle. There we go. Oh, I'm going to never hear the end of that now, Emily. We're for it.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that one. We shall bring this conversation to a close. And thank you so much for taking your life in your hands just there with Buzz. It was lovely to see him, but we appreciate it. Man just wants to be left alone.
Yes, I think he's a certain age as well, so he's kind of looking forward to his afternoon nap. Listen, thank you, Emily, for the conversation. I look forward to continuing it, and I will prepare some questions for a few years' time when we can I can turn the tables on you.
Yeah, you've got 10 years, so I'm sure you'll be fine.
I'll have plenty of material for you.
Yeah, just make sure if you write them down now that they're digitally preserved. Because
I'll do that.
years
Yeah,
time, you
we'll
might
bring
have.
out the what do you call it? The kind of the time capsule with the questions in it. That would be perfect.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for joining us on Silver Fighters. And we shall see you soon. Thanks
Thank
everyone for
you.
listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you can hear when there are new episodes coming out. And if you sign up to the RM Girl Tribe newsletter, you'll hear more info about who's coming next, long before everyone else does. So thanks very much, guys, and tune in soon. Bye for now.